Yes, I think there was absolutely an intention in the Biden administration not to use an authority that would be impossible, right? This wasn't them, sort of saying,
some
let's use this
nefarious plan.
Actually,
Right.
it wasn't nefarious in that way. It was nefarious in the sense that they wanted to say, this is limited, this is about the pandemic, because they're not willing, they're neoliberals. They're not willing to say education is a public good. We should cancel all this student debt. It's all immoral, and make college free for everybody, right? That's what they're afraid of. They're
Right.
the bigger framework movement that will push them to do it again and again. But the genie's out of the bottle. Debt's been canceled many, many times. We all know it can be canceled again and again. So, they were fighting in that sense a losing battle. The real mistake they made is not, the legal basis is important, but it actually was that they moved slowly. So advocates, including, the debt collective, who are kind of on the militant wing of things, but a lot of allies who are much more, traditional, were very clear with the administration. You need to not have an application process. You need to not limit relief based on an income cap, because doing that necessitates an application, and you need to move swiftly. So they took 6 weeks to release an application that was essentially a glorified Google document that cost the government $100 million to make, and every day bought their enemies time. And again, we are talking about lawsuits funded by billionaires the Cato Institute had a lawsuit. They filed them in the perfect, courts, teeing them up with the judges who will be sympathetic. They have deep, deep, deep pockets to do this, to find someone willing to say, yes, exactly as you said, to reverse engineer that policy ambition they have. And that was the mistake that I am incredibly angry about, was delaying when we should be governing, the big we, the big tent that includes the Biden administration. Not that they want much to do with me, and definitely don't take my advice, but knowing what we're up against, which is Republicans and right-wing, oligarchs who will do everything they can to stymie even a base, a moat of a relief for working people. And so it was that slowness and that delay that really did this. And it's clear. So the last thing I'll say on this is, in the hearings for these legal cases, the right-wing plaintiffs, the lawyers were clear that if cancellation had just been done automatically and quickly, they could never claw it back. There's no way. They were like, thank God this is taking so long, because now we can stop it. So there are lessons here. One is, and maybe the most important one is, do your policy like you mean it. Words and deeds simultaneously.
There's two analogies that come to mind with this situation. One is that during in the American Rescue Act, they, instead of expanding Medicare to provide for health insurance people, they did it through COBRA. So, I mean, and they provided free COBRA. If you're getting health insurance during that period of time, it is free to you. From the perspective of somebody who's wants the material benefits of health insurance during that time, it was free to you. It was much more expensive for the U.S. government to do, but they did not want to set that precedent that you could expand Medicare. Because once you expand it once, people are like, hey, wait a second, why don't we continue to have that? Or at least they're afraid of people asking that question. And then the second analogy would be in the Build Back Better bill. They should have gone on that much quicker after the American Rescue Act. They should have done it a year earlier instead of slowing things down. Because the one thing I think that we've learned in this context is that, and I think there is a will there by the Biden administration. I don't think it's because of the goodness of their hearts, but I think from a political standpoint, they understood the importance of it to at least give some student debt relief. But I think you're absolutely right. They didn't want to set a precedent that this could be extended and people would get the idea that you could do this at any time. Again, I think that's also a folly on their part as well, because people are, that's the mindset that people have. But they also, like you say, they delayed in this where they could have just said, like, we have all the records. We know who's there. The only reason why they set up this application process, as easy it was, is to sort of say, like, let's see, maybe there's a bunch of people who don't really care about it. And we're talking about 45 million people. If 5 million didn't happen to follow the news or get it, then there's some, I guess, savings or whatnot. It's not as big as people said. And, but they could have done it 48 hours after Biden announced it, and then facts on the ground. That's it. End of story. Move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. And again, we've seen this movie before. This is why I have a bit of optimism. I wouldn't call it a silver lining, but, optimism of the will. So again, I've worked for years with students of for-profit colleges. We organized the first student debt strike in 2015. The Obama administration trickled relief instead of, it was well proven. And in fact, the CFPB and other entities validated this. There was systemic fraud. They made every debtor individually prove they had been defrauded, just one by one kind of picked people off. A lot of people didn't know that there was an application to submit, because that's what happens. Actually, the most vulnerable, the most in need of student debt relief often don't know what the process is. So they trickled out this relief. Trump took office. We spent 4 years fighting DeVos to just hold ground. And in June of this year, the Biden administration is basically assented to our demands. The demands we had at the beginning: cancel every penny for all these students automatically, immediately, no application, no delay. And they raised over $6 billion of debt for nearly 600,000 people. So we need to make that happen faster this time around by keeping up the fight and being relentless about, this point that, we cannot govern like it's, 1993 or something.
Right.
And we have some time. We didn't have time then, actually. That's what we know today. We didn't have time then. And we definitely do not have time today.
I can appreciate why the Biden administration may not be too psyched to talk to you and keep you updated on what they're doing. But do you hear anything through your channels as to what they're predisposed to do in the event that the Supreme Court says no? I mean, on one hand, the idea of punting seems like a bad idea to me. On the other hand, the closer we get to that next election, it seems to me the more pressure there is on them to, at the very least, deliver this, because it was by any way that you could measure, it was at the very least not a political liability whatsoever. And it was more than likely a political benefit. I mean, it seems like for them, in their punting this, they're putting it into play in the next election, and that they're going to need to do this.
Yeah, no, I think this is the thing. They've also sent they sent emails out over the last 48 hours to millions of people saying your application was approved. Yes, it's tied up in the courts. People are counting on this. The President of the United States, the Department of Education have given their word and said, you applied for relief, and we approved you for it. And it was not a political liability. The people who said it was going to be were, let's name some names: Larry Summers, Jason Furman, the neoconservative economist, Matthew Iglesias, saying, oh, this is going to be so horrible. People get their debts canceled. There's going to be this centrist backlash and a right-wing backlash. Oh, to the contrary. A recent poll.
Not even a hair. The thing was, no, and in fact, it wasn't even a 24-hour news cycle, how quickly it went away.
Well, and people loved it. I mean, polling just said 60% of voters under the age of 30 said it was either very important or the only reason they voted. And we're talking about elections that were won by, small margins. And so you could, make a case. The student debt cancellation helped hold the Senate, that helped stem that anticipated red tide. So I think they're really playing with fire by letting people down. The Debt Collective, as we do, is organizing a debt strike and saying, look, you can never turn on payments for debts the President of the United States has promised to cancel. No, we can't pay and we won't pay. And we're going to have to keep fighting. I mean, they've never given a penny of relief out of the goodness of their hearts. Debtors have always had to organize to raise the political stakes. But here the political stakes are clear and they are electoral. This is the, and there's data to back us up. We always said this is going to be a popular thing. People are weighted down by these loans. Generations ago, it was not like this, and people know that. People who don't have student debt have loved ones and friends who have it. This is a popular pocketbook policy. And so I really think the Biden administration, we have leverage to force them to deliver on this, and they have the legal authority to do so. We will not accept a future where a right-wing Supreme Court or these lower courts, full of lifetime appointees put in place by people like Donald Trump, get to decide whether, ultimately whether we live or die. Because this is, again, about more than student debt relief. It's about, the habitability of the environment. So no, we need to govern creatively and figure out how to provide the things people need, to not just survive, but to thrive.